Hello there. It's morning here, 11:32, but it may be in the middle of the night when you're watching this. It may be 0700, who knows. But good morning. I'm Robert McKay. The channel, as you saw, is Whiskey for Beginners. As you also saw, it is absolutely a thoroughly amateur production. And today, I want to become effusive, or as effusive as I am capable of. This is a Glencairn glass. Let me try to get to where you can see it fairly well. And I want to do as best as I can an ode to the Glencairn. First, let me discuss the pronunciation. This is not a Glencairn. It's Glencairn. The AI forms one sound. There is nothing between the R and the N, so that last part is cairn. Probably in Scotland, it's something sort of semi-close to Glencairn. But I'm not Scottish, and I don't know how good my impression of a Scottish accent is. And they have multiple accents too, just like we do. In English, it's a Glencairn or Glencairn, depending on how you want to accent it. I'm a Texas hick. It's a Glencairn. And if you're not willing to pronounce it right, then probably you should just say glass, huh? There's nothing wrong with pronouncing words correctly. In fact, I've run across some people who pronounce things so oddly, I don't know what they're saying. But as for this glass, they designed it in Scotland originally back in, I think it was in the 80s. I haven't done research for this because the glass is what I'm talking about, not the history. And the design sort of languished, and then in, I think it was the early 2000s, they resurrected it, and with input from blenders at various distilleries and blending houses, they refined the shape, and it is an unusual shape for a glass. But the idea is the same as that of a champagne flute or a wine glass. You might have seen wine tasting glasses. They're wider and then they narrow some towards the top, and they have that long stem and the round base. Well, this has a wide part that narrows toward the top, and that is so that you have the place to fill it to is right here at the wide spot, and so you have a wide area for evaporation to occur and the whiskey fumes to rise into the air, and then the narrow part concentrates those so that when you nose the whiskey, you can get the aromas better. Now, there are some who have criticized this as concentrating them too much because it, after all, was designed for Scottish whiskey, which certainly in the States, and from what I can tell, in Scotland as well, they typically drink at 80 proof or 90 proof in that neighborhood. But in American whiskey, you get single barrels and you get barrel strength. You get higher proof stuff. And so some have criticized this as concentrating it too much so that it burns your nose instead of giving you the aromas. I have not found that to be the case. I've had stuff in here as high as 128.2, which is not the highest proof, I grant. And as long as I'm judicious and don't just shove my nose way down in there, I get the aromas and I don't get the burning in my nose. And then it has this, it rings here. I don't know if you can hear it. On the base, it's clunk, clunk, clunk. Of course, I'm also holding the thing. But this base serves the same purpose has that long, thin stem and round base on a wine glass. And you can hold it like this and swirl it around and drink. And that way you don't transfer your body heat to the whiskey. And whiskey can be sensitive to that. But if it's on a table and you're picking it up, it's kind of awkward to grab it by the base. And I have come to just hold it like this. That's still minimal contact with the whiskey through the glass, minimal heat transfer. But look at this glass. The practical realities of it gave it the shape that it is, but somebody also, I think, had an artistic eye, because this is the prettiest glass I have ever seen anywhere for any purpose. This is pretty. It's got these graceful flowing lines, and even the base has its artistic uses. It sits there solid, it holds the glass, it presents that glass to you. And as far as I'm concerned, you could put one of these in a museum and let people pay to look at it. It's pretty. But beyond the pretty, it does what they designed it to do. Swirl the whiskey. There's nothing in here because I have to drive in a bit and go to work. But you swirl the whiskey and it swirls up and it coats the glass, and you can watch the legs form. You can see it perfectly. And then when you bring the glass to your nose, you get the fumes of it, you get the aromas, you get all the various notes. And depending on what you're drinking, you might get flowers, you might get honey, you might get oak, you might get it, whatever. And different people, of course, get different things from the same whiskey. Even the same person drinking the same whiskey on different days might have a slightly different experience, get slightly different notes. But it concentrates them so well, and you can approach your nose to it cautiously and become acclimated to the alcohol and go further and further in, and in multiple nosings get everything out of that whiskey that's there to smell. And then when you tilt it up and drink, there are people who complain, well, it blocks my face when I'm drinking. Well, if you have a rocks glass, it does the same thing. You might not have to tilt the rocks glass as far back, but when you're taking a drink from a rocks glass, oh, the glass is in front of your face. So people criticize this for that, and it makes no sense. Because after all, when you're taking a sip of whiskey, the point is the whiskey. You get that sip in your mouth, and even as you're sipping, you can get some of the aroma, because taste and smell have such a close connection. And you get that sip in your mouth, and you roll it around, and you get what's there. And this glass is perfect for the purpose. In Scotland, this has become the official whiskey tasting glass. Now, it may be that at the various distilleries and blending houses, they still use the copitas. It means little cup, and it's kind of a wine glass with that wide part that narrows down the stem and the base. And I've seen people using one, and they're holding it by the flat base in a very awkward way. Don't ask me why. If you don't want to touch where the whiskey is, hold the stem. It would make more sense. But there may be people in Scotland or Ireland or even the States still using copitas. Excuse me. But why? When this is more compact, prettier, and is specifically designed for whiskey. Now, it may be that when you drink whiskey, you'll use a different glass. I started out with a rocks glass, kind of a rocks glass. The rocks glass has the sides straight up and down, and these were slightly angled outward as you went up. But I learned about the Glencairn, and I said, I want something designed for whiskey, which is going to give me that concentration of the aromas and flavors. And so I went out looking for one glass. I wound up all I had was a box of 4. And I've been using them ever since and don't regret it. Now, if you prefer the Norland glass or oh shoot, my mind is gone. There's a Canadian Glencairn, Bourbon Real Talk, with Randy Sullivan's channel, which is very good. Has some glasses that he designed for higher proof stuff, and they look almost exactly like Glencairns. There are some differences. I don't see the need for those myself, but some people might like them. You might like them. There are various kinds of glasses out there, but I think you will not find a better glass than the Glencairn. And you certainly won't get a prettier glass than the Glencairn. And so it has no whiskey in it, as I've mentioned, but we're using a real Glencairn, an imaginary whiskey. Here's mud in your eye.